Hey guys, my name is Sonia. I'd classified this story as a story of multiple losses of mine, and some of them happen to be for the better, so to speak. Everything started a few weeks before my graduation from high school. I had been dating Nick for more than a year already. We were always together, all the time, and everywhere. At school, after class, at the gym. He even insisted that I go to all of his football practices, and obviously I never missed a single game. I had almost totally given up hanging out with my girlfriends because, Nick didn't like it when I would go somewhere without him, but I didn't mind. However, the closer we got to graduation, the less time we were able to spend together. Final exams were also approaching, so at some point, preparing for them, sending applications to colleges, some extra time spent at school to get better grades for me, and additional training for Nick had started to become really time-consuming. He and I could no longer be together like day and night, and this had added some major drama to my life. We also started to fight over it pretty often. Usually, I was the one to give in, while Nick just continued to act like the alpha male, so to speak. One morning, I got woken up by my mom. She came in my room with her eyes full of tears and said that my great-grandma had just been admitted to the hospital with some health problems. Of course, I got really worried and we went to visit her. You might say that there was nothing surprising about it, taking into account that she was 95 years old. But our whole family loved Nana a lot, and we were pretty sure that this was going to be her last hospital trip, forever. So we had to sort of start to get ready. I couldn't help but cry when I saw her there in the hospital bed. She looked really tired and seemed to be very small, but she said she was happy that I'd come. We talked a little bit, and she had asked me to do her a favor and take care of her cat, Snowball, while she was there at the hospital. Of course, I promised her I would do it, and I'd even decided to go and check on him right after the hospital. When I saw Nick right at the exit door, he looked very unfriendly, if I may say so myself. I thought he'd come to support me, but he was pretty cold with me and asked me where my cell phone was. I checked my pockets and suddenly realized that I must have forgotten it at home. I was nervous and sad about what had happened to Nana, and my parents kept breathing down my neck, so I'd completely forgotten about everything else. And when I'd received my regular morning text from Nick, I'd texted him back saying that I was going to hospital and rushed to see Nana. He might have thought that it was me who needed medical assistance, and since I'd left my phone at home and he couldn't reach me, he'd gotten worried and rushed to the hospital himself. I explained everything to him and said how sorry I was for making him worry. However, he still seemed to be a little angry and definitely not happy. For a second, I thought that he should have been more kind to me because I was about to lose my Nana, but I tried to drive these thoughts away. I had gotten used to Nick's over-aggressiveness and resentful temper somehow. Also, I was about to take my final exam in about 2 hours and I needed to feed Granny's cat, so, I was too busy for negative thoughts. The next couple of days were a nightmare for me. I had to visit Nana, feed the cat, do some stuff for my parents, and so on. And as my bad luck would have it, my car engine was giving out, so I was constantly late everywhere I went. And Nick decided to wait until this day to show the worst of his temper. He texted me almost every hour that he was disappointed in me for something, or angry at me, or that I had forgotten about him. So at some point, for the first time in my life, I'd gotten so angry that I went down to his beloved football practice and yelled at him that we were breaking up. Right in front of the whole team. I guess I will never be able to forget his dumbfounded face, full of misunderstanding and embarrassment, because as soon as I spun on my high heels and walked away, I heard everybody begin to laugh and start to mock him. And some part of me still feels that feeling of final relief and pride for myself for having done what I'd done. It was strange, but I never thought that I was as stressed as I was about this relationship. I was driving to Nana's place to feed the cat when my phone rang. I was sure it was Nick calling me to apologize or something, and I immediately felt a determination inside myself to tell him we were over one more time. But it wasn't Nick. It was my mom calling to say that Nana was gone. Of course, it was awful and very hard to hear that, even though I was sort of ready for it. After the funeral, I had taken Snowball to live in my room, and I felt that he was also missing Nana. Each time he saw me sitting or lying on my bed, he'd settle himself comfortably nearby as if asking me to stroke his fur. People often told me that I pretty much looked like Nana when she was younger, so he might also be thinking the same thing. There was one really irritating factor in all of this: Nick's attention. He seemed to have finally understood how empty his life was without me and what an idiot he had been, especially recently, as he'd put it. He'd even sent me flowers, but I felt nothing for him. I guess it's just like they say, love and hate are just one step apart. I didn't hate him, of course. It's just, he was annoying. But I decided to ignore him totally. At some point, I thought he had gone insane when he came to my house at 3 a.m. crying and begging me to forgive him. I felt pity for him, but I'd already decided to be consistent, so I refused to take him back, and then he immediately became furious and promised that I'd regret my decision. Later on, I had seen him a couple of times with different girls. He tried to make me jealous of him, I guess, but I had plenty of stuff to do with preparing for college. By the way, I'd begun hanging out with my girlfriends again, and I was happy about that because it turned out that we had been missing each other a lot. It had been almost a month since I received a text from Nick when something happened that became the scariest moment of my life so far. It was already late at night, and I was home alone, and I wasn't really paying attention to where Snowball was when I noticed through the window that my car's trunk was wide open. This was really strange because I was sure that I had closed it. Anyway, I went to go and check to see whether everything was all right, and everything actually was all right. Just for some strange reason, the trunk was open. I went back trying to recall whether I'd really forgotten to close it or not. Maybe I could have, because I went to get groceries earlier. Speaking of groceries, it was at that moment that I decided to feed Snowball, but I couldn't find him anywhere. Oh my gosh, I must have left the door open and he must have run away, I thought. What a strange day of open doors it was, right? I had nothing to do but take a flashlight and set out for a search across the neighborhood. I was cursing myself for not being able to complete Nana's last request and look after a single cat. After an hour or so of my useless search, I was begging her in my mind to forgive me for that, when I got back home and found a piece of paper on my doorstep which turned out to be a letter from a kidnapper. Do you know those letters you see in Hollywood movies where every single letter has been ripped out of a newspaper or a magazine? The one that I received was just like that. At first I got really scared because, it was late and I was alone, and finding the letter meant that somebody had actually been around my house. But when I read that letter, I also felt how miserable and no-win my situation was. It said that somebody had found my cat and would give him back to me if I got back together with Nick. I'm sure you all have probably guessed who that somebody actually was. It was not so funny, I thought, and this insanity with Nick had to be put to a stop. I jumped into my car and rushed to Nick's house, trying to reach him on the phone, but he wasn't picking up. Normally, I was a law-abiding driver, even a bit slow maybe, but at that moment I felt adrenaline running through my veins and totally ignored the road signs and speed limits. As a result, I hadn't noticed that there was a pothole on my way. Or rather, I had noticed it, but it was too late. I'd spun the steering wheel to the right and when I opened my eyes, I found myself in the hospital bed surrounded by my mom, my dad, and Nick. It felt like my whole body was a giant bruise and everything hurt so much. I was told that I'd crashed my car into a tree. The car was pretty much totaled, and I was happy to have actually survived, having gotten off almost without a scratch. I had a slight brain concussion and my left leg was broken. But what was really weird is that I was lucky that Nick happened to pass by at that moment and that he'd immediately called 911, probably having saved my life. Of course, when my parents left, he rushed to apologize and promised to pay off my insurance expenses. He told me that he never meant for everything to end up like that. He just wanted me back, so he couldn't come up with anything better but to blackmail me. He knew that I loved Snowball so much, so he opened my car trunk to lure me out of the house. Then he kidnapped Snowball and hid behind the corner in his car. But when he'd seen that I had rushed out somewhere, he decided to follow me. The rest of the story you already know, and of course he begged me not to tell anyone about his stupid deed. Well, I'm already back at home, but my leg is still in a cast. Nick finally backed off me, but before that, he'd given me some money to repair my damaged car. I haven't seen him in person since that night. By the way, I heard he's joined the army, and well, good for him. So far, I haven't told anybody about what he did. God teaches us to forgive, and I hope someday I'll be able to forgive him. Come on, guys, click the subscribe button, unless you want to miss other exciting stories that have actually happened. I bet you found this video interesting, so give it a like. See you soon.